week. So the next one we had is the Chivo wallet. So the El Salvador Bitcoin wallet Chivo had $52 million worth of remittances in the first 5 months of 2022. So January through May of 2022, which I think percentage wise is not a huge percentage of El Salvador's remittances, but depending on which news source you go to for this, it's either viewed as a very good thing or a very bad thing, which I find interesting. The way I look at this is that 52 million in remittances. I don't know what the average remittance size is coming into El Salvador, which I believe most of those remittances are typically coming from the U.S. or Mexico, or other countries where people who live in El Salvador, where their families are working. But I wouldn't imagine that those are particularly large transactions at a given time. So, at a minimum, we're talking about thousands of transactions. I'd say probably many thousands of transactions that have been moved from, places like Western Union or possibly even some other electronic payment platforms, whether that's PayPal or I don't know, Cash App. All of those are still in the mix, but you're seeing a significant amount of these transactions happening in Bitcoin. And I think one thing that I think is really interesting about this $52 million versus all of the rest of the remittances is that, El Salvador is a country where 70% of the people don't have bank accounts. And all you need in El Salvador in order to use your Chivo wallet or to transact in Bitcoin or over the Lightning Network, you just need a phone with an internet connection. And where, only 30% of the country of El Salvador has bank accounts, I think it's like 80 to 90 something percent have cell phones. It's a large percentage. The majority have it. And I think it's interesting that, to note that in order to do this, you don't need a bank. You just need a phone. And, if you're going to use Western Union is different because you can go from one physical location to another to send the money, but you also have to go and you have to wait for it to show up. And it's expensive. For all of the other ones I mentioned, whether it's PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, all of those, you pretty much need a bank account in order to utilize it. Right, so it's not really a solution for the unbanked. And that's not just an El Salvador comment. I mean, that's just a global comment that if you are using the Bitcoin network, whether that's over Lightning or actual Bitcoin, if you're using that to transfer value between any 2 points in the world, it's going to be instant. It's going to be almost free, and it's going to be permanent. No one's gonna, you can't bounce a check in Bitcoin. So I think that's just an interesting piece of it. And I'm curious to see, how this continues to grow and what percentage of their total remittances this ends up being.
Yeah. So I think that there are a couple ways, there are a couple things that I glean from this. The first is, and correct my math if you can, if I'm wrong, but I think the average remittance, and I could be wildly off, is probably somewhere between $100 to $250.
Okay.
But let's just say it's $500 per remittance. Well, 52 million divided by 500,000 is 104,000 transactions.
Your math's right so far.
Okay. So let's just say 100,000 or so transactions in 5 months, right? So that's 20,000 transactions per month. That's a lot of transactions for a new technology that these are the early adopters, right? It doesn't matter if all of a sudden El Salvador has this. It's not like they're going to have some kind of bizarre adoption curve where everybody's just using it from day one. You're trying to get a country of, I think the country's got about 4 million people, right?
I think 6 million.
Okay, 6 or so. But that's a lot of users to get on there. And you have to consider the sophistication of the users. So for older people, let's just say anyone in El Salvador over the age of 70, they probably struggle with this quite a bit.
Hmm?
So you're talking about, but regardless, with all that, you still had some pretty crazy adoption numbers. And I don't think that the number of $500 is exactly right. If the average remittance is, let's say, $250, then you're talking about almost 40,000 transactions a month.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is a huge success. If you're launching something new and you're getting people to do one of the exercises that requires the most amount of trust, right? Sending money, you don't just trust anyone to send your money. You want to make sure this is actually going to work. So you have to have a pretty good amount of faith in what you're using. So let's say that we have somewhere between 20,000 and 40,000, could even be more than 40,000 for all we know, transactions per month on this new platform. I think that's amazing. I know it's a small percentage of the overall remittances, but what do you expect exactly in year number one? So I think that's one sign of a huge success, and it also makes me think about the impact that this will have and that Bitcoin will have globally, because we're only talking about, for the most part, we're talking about the U.S. to El Salvador. I bet you
Mm-hmm.
90x% of these remittances are coming from the US to El Salvador. But then we have to start to think about the world a little bit bigger, in that you can use this to send money from any country to any country, from any person to any person. And so you could see quite a bit of remittances that go to families in other countries going worldwide, meaning people in Europe are sending it to someone in Guatemala, someone in Germany is sending this to someone. I'm not even going to use like necessarily a third world country, but someone in Portugal. That the ability for people just to send payments to who they want to send to, who are not in their jurisdiction, who a lot of times are in another country, is significant. And we could see this really being, I could see us looking back on this in 10 years and saying, remember when we talked about the 52 million in El Salvador?
Right.
That was funny, because now it's just a common thing that nobody really thinks about. And then probably the global amount for half a year is maybe like, 500 billion or something, just between people, who knows? But I think that's an excellent start for El Salvador. And if there are news stories that, there's, that saying, lies, damn lies, and statistics. You can
Sure.
frame this any way you want to frame it, but if we're being intellectually honest, we have to realize this is a new technology. This is something, like you said before, that helps the unbanked. I don't think people in the US really get that concept of being unbanked, that so many people are disconnected from financial institutions. We don't think about it because we live in a rich country. And you've had a bank account since you were a teenager,
Right.
but there are plenty of adults in El Salvador that do not have a bank account and therefore are excluded from financial technology. So I think that's a great start. I think it's great news. I'd like to see the number higher, of course, but I'm quite impressed with that.
Yeah. And look, I think I heard a podcast recently that said this. I thought it was really, really a good way to frame it, is that the internet, when it, came kind of into existence, was innovative because it allowed you to take any piece of information and send it to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And Bitcoin is really the same thing, but with value. You can take monetary value and send it to anyone in the world, and you can do it instantly and, for all intents and purposes, free.
And you can send a smaller amount than you've ever been able to send before. We're going to see just how small as time goes on, but I think that's one of the more fascinating parts.